We're live from Georgia, a key battleground state in the race for the White House. In just moments, the current U.S. President will debate the former U.S. President as their party's presumptive nominees, a first in American history. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world to our studios in Atlanta. This is the CNN presidential debate. This debate is produced by CNN and is coming to you live on CNN, CNN International, CNN.com, CNN Max, and CNN Español. This is a pivotal moment between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump in their rematch for the nation's highest office. Each will make his case to the American people with just over 4 months until Election Day. Good evening, I'm Dana Bash, anchor of CNN's Inside Politics and co-anchor of State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper, anchor of CNN's The Lead and co-anchor of State of the Union. Dana and I will co-moderate this evening. Our job is to facilitate a debate between the two candidates tonight. Before we introduce them, we want to share the rules of the debate with the audience at home. Former President Trump will be on the left side of the screen, and President Biden will be appearing on the right. A coin toss determined their positions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question and 1 minute each for responses and rebuttals. An additional minute for follow-up clarification or response is at the moderator's discretion. When it's time for a candidate to speak, his microphone will be turned on, and his opponent's microphone will be turned off. Should a candidate interrupt when his microphone is muted, he will be difficult to understand for viewers at home. At the end of the debate, each candidate will get 2 minutes for closing statements. There is no studio audience tonight. Pre-written notes, props, or contact with campaign staff are not permitted during the debate. By accepting our invitation to debate, both candidates and their campaigns agreed to accept these rules. Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. Biden enters. Thank you, great to be here. And please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Trump enters. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Let's begin the debate, starting with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120, and typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump? Biden, we've got to take a look at what I was left when I became president, what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled, many people were dying. All he said was, "It's not that serious, just inject a little bleach into your arm, you'll be all right." The economy collapsed, there were no jobs, the unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. So, what we had to do was try to put things back together again, and that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs, we brought our position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, but there's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come from a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, was a problem. The price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems, and we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination of what I was left with and corporate greed is the reason why we're in this problem right now. In addition to that, if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos, literally chaos. So, we put things back together. We created those jobs, we made sure we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. We're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So, we're working to bring down the prices around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done. Trump, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression like in 1929. We did a great job, we got a lot of credit for the economy, the military, and for having no new wars. Everything was going great. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that were a disaster for our country. Other than that, we handed him back a country where the stock market was higher than before COVID, which nobody thought was possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs from COVID. He has not done a good job. Inflation is killing our country. It's absolutely killing us. Biden, well, look, the greatest economy in the world? He's the only one who thinks that. I don't know anybody else who thinks that. The fact of the matter is that his economy rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion, and raised the deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president, other than Herbert Hoover, who lost more jobs than he created. The idea that he did something significant in the military? When he was president, we were still losing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. I'm the only president in this century who doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did. Tapper, President Trump, I want to follow up if I can. Trump, am I allowed to respond to him? Tapper, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can use your minute as you wish. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the US. How will you ensure that doesn't drive prices even higher? Trump, it's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs, and the jobs went down and then bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce-back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. He inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 to 15 months and then blew up under his leadership because they spent money like people who didn't know what they were doing. It was probably the worst administration in history. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, strength, and power. He got out, and it was the most embarrassing day in our country's history. Tapper, President Trump, over the last 8 years under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs. According to a new nonpartisan analysis, President Trump, your administration approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. Former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further. With the US facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now? Trump, because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy we've ever seen, just prior to COVID and even after COVID. It was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. When we cut the taxes, for example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars into our country. The country was booming like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to use the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else had. We got hit with COVID, and we did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all the therapeutics and things we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration than under mine, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than under ours, and we were right in the middle of it. He did a mandate, which was a disaster. Mandating the vaccine was the thing people most objected to, and he did a very poor job. Not only poor there but throughout the entire world. We're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership, they don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation. Between weaponizing his election, trying to go after his political opponent, and all the things he's done, we've become like a third world nation. It's a shame the damage he's done to our country. I'd love to ask him why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy it. Tapper, President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt. Biden, he had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period. Number 1. Number 2, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 billionaires in America. They pay only 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24% or 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to make sure we fund child care, elder care, strengthen our health care system, and make every person eligible for the benefits we've provided. We've done a lot, including reducing the price of insulin to $35 a month. Tapper, President Trump, your response? Trump, well, he's right. He did beat Medicare, he beat it to death. He's destroying Medicare because all these people are coming in, and they're being put on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security, and they're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security, he will wipe out Medicare. It's a shame what's happened to our country in the last 4 years. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people, they cannot believe what has happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people for what we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal. Tapper, thank you, President Trump. Dana Bash, this is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This morning, the court ruled on another abortion case, temporarily allowing emergency abortions to continue in Idaho despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states. However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills, which are used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication? Trump, first of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision. I will not block it. This is a complex issue, but not really. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, religious leaders, everyone wanted it back to the states. I put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they voted in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the states. This is something that everyone wanted. Now, 10 years ago or so, they started talking about other aspects, but every legal scholar throughout the world wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, the decision was more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas is the same. Texas and Florida are different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. The states control it, that's the vote of the people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions. I believe it's important to have exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Some people follow their heart, but you also have to get elected, which involves other considerations. The problem is that the radical Democrats will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. If you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, "We'll put the baby aside and determine what to do with the baby," meaning they would kill the baby. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing. Biden, it's been a terrible thing what you've done. The vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided, and they still support it. This idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous. This is the guy who says states should be able to decide, but in some states, like those with 6-week bans, you don't even know you're pregnant. You can't see a doctor and have them decide based on your circumstances. Turning this issue over to the states is like turning civil rights back to the states. There are so many young women who have been raped by family members or others and can't get help. Some states even try to arrest them when they cross state lines for an abortion. Trump, many young women have been murdered by the same people he allowed to come across our border. Our border is now considered the most dangerous place in the world because he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country, raping and killing women. As far as abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states. The states are voting, and in many cases, it's a very liberal decision, while in others, it's the opposite. This brings it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders if they knew about this issue. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back but wasn't able to. Everyone wanted it brought back, and now it is. Many presidents tried to get it back, but I was the one to do it. Again, this gives it to the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way. Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy? Biden, I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first trimester is between the woman and the doctor. The second trimester involves the doctor in extreme situations. The third trimester is between the woman and the state. The idea that the founders wanted politicians making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. No politician should make that decision, a doctor should. If I'm elected, I will restore Roe v. Wade. Trump, so that means he can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth because some Democrat-run states allow it after birth. The former governor of Virginia even suggested setting the baby aside and deciding what to do with it, which means killing the baby. He supports ripping the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and killing it. Nobody, Democrat or Republican, wants that to happen. Biden, that is simply not true. Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. Late-term abortions are only permissible if the woman's life is in danger. We are not for late-term abortion, period. Trump, under Roe v. Wade, you can have late-term abortion depending on the state. We don't think that's a good thing, we think it's radical. Democrats are the radicals, not Republicans. For 51 years, Roe v. Wade was the law, supported by constitutional scholars. It was taken away because I put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. What will he do if MAGA Republicans control Congress and pass a universal ban on abortion? I'll sign it, and he'll veto it. Host, thank you. Let's turn now to immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch, overwhelming border states and overburdening cities like New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis? Biden, we've worked hard to get a bipartisan agreement that made significant changes. We increased the number of border police and asylum officers. The Border Patrol endorsed me in my position. When he was president, he separated babies from their mothers and put them in cages. I changed the law to reduce the number of illegal crossings by 40% compared to when he left office. We are continuing to improve with more Border Patrol and asylum officers. Trump, I don't know what he said at the end of that sentence, and I don't think he does either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. All he had to do was leave it alone. Instead, he opened up our border and our country to people from prisons, mental institutions, insane asylums, and terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now from all over the world. He left it open without needing legislation because I didn't have legislation. I just said close the border. We had the safest border in history, and now we have the worst. Host: Thank you, President Trump. Trump, we had the safest border in history. People are dying all over the place, including those coming up. President Biden, the only terrorist who has done anything crossing the border under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda member and 3 American soldiers. That's the only terrorist. I'm not saying no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons and we're welcoming these people is simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating and lying. Host: President Trump, staying on the topic of immigration, you've said that you're going to carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. Does that mean you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, whose spouses are citizens, and those who have lived here for decades? If so, how will you do it? Trump: First, he said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists anywhere in the world. It had a huge impact on everything, not just the border. He's the one killing people with bad policies, leading to hundreds of thousands of deaths. We're living in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, California, and every state because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. His ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies are causing people to come in and kill our citizens at unprecedented levels. We call it Biden migrant crime. They're killing our citizens at levels we've never seen before. Recently, 3 incredible young girls were murdered. I spoke to the mother of one, who was just 12 years old. This is horrible. We're becoming an uncivilized country. He opened the borders, and now we have to get a lot of these people out fast because they're going to destroy our country. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places while our veterans are on the street and dying. He doesn't care about our veterans or the military at all. I had the highest approval rating for veterans and took care of the VA. Now it's less than half because he's undone all the great things we did. He has allowed so many people to come in, leading to a very sad day. Host: President Biden, you have the mic. Biden: Every single thing he said is a lie. For example, veterans are a lot better off since I passed the PACT Act. 1 million of them now have insurance, and their families have it too, covering issues like Agent Orange and burn pits. His group opposed that. We have great respect for veterans. My son spent a year in Iraq, living next to a burn pit, and came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. I was recently in France for D-Day and spoke about those heroes who died. I went to the World War II and World War I cemeteries, which he refused to visit. He told his 4-star general, I don't want to go there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser or a sucker. You're the sucker and loser. Trump: First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing. He made that up and put it in commercials. We've notified him, and 19 people said I didn't say it. Who would say that at a cemetery or about our veterans? Nobody's taken better care of our soldiers than I have. I'm glad this came up. There's nobody who's taken better care of our soldiers. To think that I would say suckers and losers in front of generals is absurd. We have 19 people who said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, and just like the 51 intelligence agents were made up. The 16 economists and the 51 intelligence agents said the laptop was Russia disinformation, but it wasn't. It came from Hunter Biden, not Russia. He made up the suckers and losers story, and he should apologize to me. A 4-star general on your staff said you said it, period. Biden, there's no need to apologize for anything. We've done more for veterans than any president in American history. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home and equip them when they go to war. The VA is doing more for veterans now than ever before. Host, thank you. Let's move to the topic of foreign policy. I want to begin with Russia's war against Ukraine, which is now in its 3rd year. Former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he'll only end this war if Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has claimed and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. Are Putin's terms acceptable to you? Trump, first of all, our veterans and soldiers can't stand this guy. They think he's the worst commander-in-chief we've ever had. They like me more than anyone else, based on all the information. As for Russia and Ukraine, if we had a real president who was respected by Putin, he would never have invaded Ukraine. A lot of people are dead now, much more than people know. Double or triple the reported numbers. Biden did nothing to stop it. In fact, I think he encouraged Russia. The incompetence shown during the Afghanistan withdrawal was the most embarrassing moment in our country's history. Putin saw that and decided to invade. We left billions of dollars of equipment behind and lost 13 beautiful soldiers. We even left American citizens behind. Putin saw that and thought, I'm going to take Ukraine. His dream was to re-establish the Soviet Union, but he never would have invaded under my administration. Iran was broke under me, and without money, they couldn't support Hamas or any terror activities. Now, the world is blowing up under Biden. Biden, I've never heard so much nonsense in my whole life. Iran attacked American troops, causing brain damage to many, and Trump did nothing. When we airlifted people from Afghanistan, we got over 100,000 Americans and others out. Trump encouraged Putin to do whatever he wanted in Ukraine. He claimed Kyiv would fall in 5 days, but it didn't happen. Putin wasn't able to get it done and lost thousands of troops. Trump, Putin's terms are not acceptable. But this war never should have started. Biden has given over $200 billion to Ukraine. Every time Zelensky comes to the US, he walks away with $60 billion. He's the greatest salesman ever. I'm not knocking him, I'm not knocking anything. I'm only saying the money we're spending on this war shouldn't be spent. It should have never happened. I will have this war settled between Putin and Zelensky before I take office on January 20th. I'll have it settled fast, and people won't be dying so needlessly and stupidly. Biden, the fact is that Putin is a war criminal. He's killed thousands of people and made it clear that he wants to re-establish the Soviet Empire, not just a piece of it. He wants all of Ukraine. If you think he'll stop there, you're wrong. If he takes Ukraine, what happens to Poland, Belarus, and those NATO countries? All the money we give Ukraine is for weapons made here in the United States, not money at this point. Our NATO allies have also contributed as much funding for Ukraine as we have. That's why we're strong. Host, thank you. Moving on to the Middle East. In October, Hamas attacked Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Among those held and thought to still be alive are 5 Americans. Israel's response has killed thousands of Palestinians and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Biden, you've put forward a proposal to resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. What additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes. Biden, everyone from the United Nations Security Council to the G7, the Israelis, and NATO have endorsed the plan I put forward, which has 3 stages. First, trading the hostages for a ceasefire, second, a ceasefire with additional conditions, and third, ending the war. Hamas is the only one who wants the war to continue. We are providing Israel with all the weapons they need, except for 2,000 lb bombs which cause too many innocent casualties. We are supporting Israel in every way, and I'm the one who organized the world against Iran. We must be careful about using certain weapons in populated areas. Going back to Ukraine, we have an ocean separating us. The European nations have spent over $100 billion, but they need to contribute more. When I was president, I got NATO to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. This administration hasn't done that. Trump, Israel is the one that wants to go after Hamas, not the other way around. Biden has become like a Palestinian sympathizer, but they don't like him because he's weak. As far as Ukraine, we should be asking European countries to put up more money. We're spending too much. Biden, I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? Our strength lies in our alliances. Avoiding a major war in Europe is crucial. If Putin continues to invade NATO countries, our Article 5 agreement states that an attack on one is an attack on all. Host, thank you. Let's move on to another topic. Biden, he wants to start a nuclear war? Let Putin take Ukraine and then move on to Poland and other places and see what happens. He has no idea what he's talking about. I got 50 other nations, including Japan and South Korea, to support Ukraine because they understand that such dislocation is a serious threat to world peace. No major war in Europe has ever been contained just to Europe. Host, President Trump, would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state to achieve peace in the region? Trump, I'd have to see, but before we do that, the problem is we spend all the money. They kill us on trade. I made great trade deals with European nations because their economy is about the same size as the United States. They didn't want our cars or anything else, but we had to take theirs. I changed that. The big thing I changed was getting them to pay their fair share in NATO. I told them, no, I won't support NATO if you don't pay. Billions of dollars came flowing in because of that. Now, we're paying everybody's bills again. Host, let's turn to the issue of democracy. Former President Trump, on January 6, 2021, after you rallied your supporters, some of them stormed the Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated counting of electoral votes. As president, you swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe you violated that oath through your actions and inactions on January 6 and worry that you'll do it again? Trump, I don't think too many believe that. On January 6, we had a great border, were energy independent, had the lowest taxes ever, and were respected worldwide. Under Biden, our reputation is horrible. As for January 6, I told people to protest peacefully and patriotically. Nancy Pelosi admitted it was her responsibility. I offered 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned it down, as did the mayor of D.C. I saw what was happening and tried to help. Biden, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill. I sat in the dining room off the Oval Office for 3 hours, watching him do nothing. He was begged by his vice president and Republican colleagues to call for a stop, but he didn't. Instead, he talked about these people being patriots. Now, he wants to forgive them and commute their sentences. He went to every single court in the nation, and they all rejected his claims. Host, thank you, President Biden. Let's move to another topic. Biden, the Supreme Court said no. This guy is responsible for what happened. He did nothing, and those people should be in jail. Now he says if he loses again, it could be a bloodbath. Trump, what they've done to innocent people is shameful. Look at what happened in Portland and Minneapolis with the fires and destruction. I brought in the National Guard, and cities would have been destroyed without them. The Unselect Committee, which had biased members, destroyed all the information they found because it proved we were right. They should go to jail for that. Host, thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have a minute to respond. Biden, the only person on this stage who is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. He didn't stop what was happening on January 6. Those convicted deserve it. They broke doors, windows, and occupied offices. These are not patriots. When I asked him in previous debates to denounce the Proud Boys, he refused. Will you denounce the people who attacked the Capitol? Host: President Trump, after being convicted of 34 felonies, you said if re-elected, you would have the right to go after your political opponents. Can you clarify what you mean by that? Trump: my retribution is going to be success. We will make this country successful again. Biden's son is a convicted felon and will likely be convicted of more crimes. Joe could be convicted too. The things he's done, like at the border and in Ukraine, are criminal. I did nothing wrong, the system was rigged. Host: President Biden, you have a minute to respond. Biden: the idea that I did anything wrong is a lie. Seeking retribution against any American because your president is wrong. No president has ever spoken like that before. Trump still faces civil penalties, owes billions, and has been involved in numerous scandals. He has the morals of an alley cat. Trump: the case involving the porn star is politically motivated. A high-ranking DOJ official was moved to the Manhattan DA's office to start that case. It's going to be appealed and won. The judge was a Democrat, and so were the prosecutors. They went after me because they thought it would damage me, but the public saw through it. My poll numbers went up, and we raised more money than ever because people know it's a scam. Host: President Biden, you have said, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President Trump are voting against American democracy? Biden: the more people know about what he's done, the more they will see the threat he poses. He has numerous cases pending and has said things no other president would, like seeking retribution and praising Hitler. What got me to run was seeing Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia, carrying swastikas and torches, and him saying there were fine people on both sides. No American president should say that. Trump: that story has been debunked. I was 100% exonerated. He didn't run because of Charlottesville, he used it as an excuse. He's not equipped to be president, and his presidency is the worst in history. Every reasonable anchor has debunked his Charlottesville claim. Biden: all you have to do is listen to what was said at the time. I ran because I was worried someone like him could get elected. He shouldn't be president. We saw what happened on January 6 with our own eyes. Even his own vice president and top cabinet members haven't endorsed him this time. They know him well and refuse to support him. Host: thank you, President Biden. We'll be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate. Host: welcome back to the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Let's talk about persistent challenges you both faced in your first terms and would certainly face again in a second term. President Biden: while black unemployment dropped to a record low under your presidency, black families still earn far less than white families. Black mothers are still 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes, and black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed that you haven't made more progress? Biden: we've made significant progress. Black unemployment is at a historic low, and we've seen more black-owned small businesses start than ever before. We've increased wages and provided housing support to combat segregation in corporate housing policies. Child care costs have been reduced, and we're working to make it more affordable so more people can join the workforce. However, there's much more to be done, and I'm committed to continuing this progress. Host: you have 49 seconds left. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed with the progress so far? Biden: I understand their disappointment. Inflation is still a significant issue, and it disproportionately affects black families. We've introduced measures like a $10,000 tax credit for first-time black homebuyers and student debt relief for those in public service after 10 years. Millions have benefited, and we're going to continue working on initiatives to support black families. Host: President Trump. Trump: inflation is a huge problem, and Biden caused it. It's hurting black families, Hispanic families, and everyone else. Food prices have skyrocketed, and people can't afford groceries. I left him a country with no inflation, and he destroyed it with his green policies and excessive spending. Furthermore, the millions of people he's allowed to come through the border are taking jobs from Black and Hispanic Americans. It's going to get worse. Biden, when I took office, there was no inflation because the economy was in shambles with 15% unemployment. We created millions of jobs and provided health insurance for many, including minority communities. We've strengthened the acai, despite Trump's attempts to dismantle it. We've put more police on the streets to ensure safety and promote equity. The inflation is a result of the way we had to handle the pandemic and revive the economy. Host, thank you. Another persistent challenge is the climate crisis. 2023 was the hottest year in recorded history. Andorra. Welcome back to the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Let's talk about persistent challenges you both faced in your first terms and would certainly face again in a second term. Communities across the country are confronting the devastating effects of extreme heat, intensifying wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea levels. Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives. Will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis? Trump, first, let me address what Biden said about the police. Almost every police group in the nation supports Donald J. Trump. What he's done to the black population is horrible, including calling them super predators in the 1990s. My administration passed criminal justice reform, funded historically black colleges and universities, and created opportunity zones, which have greatly benefited black communities. Biden's policies have caused significant harm, and the influx of millions of immigrants will further take jobs from Black and Hispanic Americans. Host, you have 38 seconds left, President Trump. Will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis? Trump, I want clean water and clean air, and during my 4 years, we had the best environmental numbers ever. We used all forms of energy, and my top environmental people confirmed our success. The Paris Accord was a disaster, costing the US money while China, Russia, and India paid nothing. I pulled us out because it was unfair to the United States. Biden, the idea that he claims to have done something for the environment is outrageous. I passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We rejoined the Paris Accord because climate change is the only existential threat to humanity. Trump's administration did nothing for the environment. We need to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, or there's no way back. My administration has made significant progress in reducing pollution, and we're moving forward with initiatives like the Climate Corps to address these challenges. Trump, the Paris Accord was a bad deal for the US, costing us $1 trillion while China, Russia, and India contributed nothing. I ended it to stop wasting our money. I also lowered insulin costs for seniors and improved our health care programs. Biden's policies are destroying our medical system, schools, hospitals, and even Social Security and Medicare. Biden, the US was the only major country not part of the Paris Accord under Trump. We've made significant progress in reducing pollution and will continue to do so. By 2035, we aim to cut pollution in half. We've also established the Climate Corps to train young people in addressing climate challenges. The idea that Trump had the cleanest water and air is simply false. Host, thank you both. We'll be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate. Welcome back to the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Many older Americans rely on Social Security as a critical lifeline. President Biden, if nothing is done, seniors will see their benefits cut in just over 10 years. Will you name tonight one specific step you are willing to take to keep Social Security solvent? Biden, yes, the wealthy need to start paying their fair share. Currently, everyone making under $170,000 pays 6% of their income into Social Security. I propose that millionaires should pay 1% more. No one earning under $400,000 will see their costs rise. This change alone will help ensure the program's longevity. Host, You still have 82 seconds left. Are there any other measures to keep Social Security solvent? Biden, that one measure will go a long way. But defeating Trump is also crucial because he has repeatedly wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare. Look at the House Republican caucus plan, which he supports. They want to cut it too. Protecting our seniors is essential, and so is maintaining the ASAI, which ensures millions with pre-existing conditions are covered. I've also increased Pell Grants, making higher education more accessible for those earning under $70,000 a year. Host, President Trump, your response? Trump, I've dealt with politicians my entire life, and I've never seen anyone lie as much as Biden. Everything he says is misinformation and disinformation. On Social Security, he's destroying it by allowing millions of people to pour into our country and put them on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They're taking resources from our veterans and citizens. Our veterans are homeless while these people are put in luxury hotels. Biden doesn't know what he's doing, and it's causing real anger in this country. Biden, the idea that veterans are not being taken care of is ridiculous. As for the suckers and losers comment about our military, Trump's own general acknowledged it, and he got fired for it. On immigration, he exaggerates the impact of illegal immigration. We have the fastest growing economy in the world and the most successful economy. Trump's policies would lead to recession and increased inflation. 15 Nobel laureates in economics have said this. Additionally, 159 presidential scholars rated Trump the worst president in American history. Host, thank you, President Biden. Let's turn to the cost of childcare, which many American families struggle to afford. President Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue. What specific steps would you take to make childcare more affordable for American families? Welcome back to the CNN presidential debate. Live from Georgia. Many American families struggle to afford childcare, with the average cost rising to more than $10,000 a year per child. For many, the cost of childcare for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make childcare more affordable? Trump, just to go back, the general got fired because he was no good, and if he said that, he made it up. We have 19 people who said I didn't say it, and they're highly respected. Biden never fires anyone. I fired Comey because he was no good and drained the swamp at the FBI. He hasn't fired anyone despite the border crisis and the Afghanistan debacle, the most embarrassing moment in our history. Did you fire anyone for allowing millions of people, many from prisons and mental institutions, into our country? Our country is being destroyed as we speak. Biden is the worst president in our history, and if he wins, we won't have a country left. Biden, we are the most admired country in the world, with the finest military. No one thinks we're weak. I wasn't joking when I said historians rated him the worst president in American history. He did virtually nothing for childcare. We should significantly increase the child care tax credit and make it easier for single parents to return to work. We should encourage businesses to support working parents. Host, President Trump, the question was about what you would do to make childcare more affordable. Trump, I've been rated one of the best presidents. If given another 4 years, I'll be the best. No one has created an economy like ours or cut taxes like us. Biden wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. When we cut taxes, businesses like Apple brought money back into our country. He is the worst president in history, and everyone knows it. Biden, he's wrong. I've never raised taxes on anyone making less than $400,000. His tariffs, however, are a 10% tax on everything coming into the country, costing the average American $2,500 more a year. He talks about not raising taxes, but these tariffs increase costs for everyone. He's not doing anything to deal with the real issues affecting American families. Host, thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement. Trump, like so many politicians, this man is just a complainer. He says we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax or that tax, but he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions of people to pour in. Our military doesn't respect him. We looked like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel, and it was such a horrible thing that would have never happened if I were in charge. Iran was broke. Anyone that did business with Iran, including China, couldn't do business with the United States. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah. Ukraine should have never happened. He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it for 3.5 years. We're living in hell. We have riots everywhere. You talk about Charlottesville, this is 100 times worse. The whole country is exploding because of him. People don't respect him, and they have to respect their president. They don't respect him throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military, got the largest tax cut in history, and the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut regulations that created jobs, but he's putting a lot of those regulations back on. We did things no one has ever seen, even from a medical standpoint, with right to try, allowing terminally ill patients to try experimental treatments. We implemented choice for our soldiers, so instead of waiting months to see a doctor, they can get treated immediately. That's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. We're in a failing nation, but it's not going to fail anymore. We're going to make it great again. Host: Thank you, former President Trump. President Biden, any final remarks? Biden: Yes, our country has faced significant challenges, but we have made substantial progress. We must continue to build on this progress to ensure a better future for all Americans. Thank you. Host: Thank you to both candidates for a robust debate. This concludes the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Good night. Now, let's discuss an epidemic impacting millions of Americans that both of you have made a top priority in your first term, the opioid crisis. Despite the efforts that both of you have made, more than 100,000 Americans are dying from overdoses every year, primarily from fentanyl and other opioids. What will you do to help Americans right now in the throes of addiction who are struggling to get the treatment they need? Trump: We were doing very well in combating addiction until COVID came along. We had almost 3 years of unprecedented success, but then the pandemic hit, and drug trafficking increased. We invested in great equipment and detection dogs, and we had very low numbers. But under Biden, the numbers have skyrocketed. The drugs and human trafficking coming across our border are at record levels. We need to secure the border and stop the influx of drugs and trafficked individuals. Host: President Biden, what will you do to help Americans struggling with addiction? Biden: Fentanyl and its byproducts are devastating our communities. We need more machinery to detect fentanyl and more agents at the border. We put together a bipartisan deal for more fentanyl detection machines and more agents, but Trump opposed it for political reasons. We need those machines and the support to crack down on the supply of fentanyl. We're working with countries like Mexico to stop the precursors from reaching our borders. We need to stay tough and keep working to protect Americans. Host: President Trump, any final thoughts on this issue? Trump: We had successful programs like Remain in Mexico and ended catch and release, which helped control the flow of drugs and trafficking. Biden's policies have reversed this progress. We need to negotiate harder with countries like Mexico to get better results. And on the international front, we need to show strength, like getting American hostages back without paying massive ransoms. We need to be tough, decisive, and protect our country from these threats. Host: Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, any final thoughts? Biden: The middle class has been devastated by Trump's policies. Now, he wants a $5 trillion tax cut over the next 10 years, which will bankrupt the country. He had the largest deficit of any president in American history. He hasn't made any progress with China. We have the lowest trade deficit with China since 2010. We need to focus on real solutions and support Americans struggling with addiction through comprehensive and effective policies. Thank you. Host: Thank you, President Biden. This concludes our debate on the opioid crisis and other pressing issues. Thank you to both candidates for their participation and to our audience for tuning in. Good night. Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes to respond to the opioid crisis and what you would do to help Americans struggling with addiction. Trump: Jake, we were doing very well in tackling addiction until COVID came along. We had almost 3 years of unprecedented success. Then, the pandemic hit, and drug trafficking started to increase. We invested in great equipment and detection dogs, which are incredibly effective at spotting drugs. We had very low numbers, but since Biden took office, the numbers have skyrocketed. The amount of drugs and human trafficking, especially involving women, coming across our border is at record levels. The numbers are the worst we've ever seen because the border is so poorly managed under Biden. This isn't just about the 18 million people, which I believe is an underestimate because it doesn't account for the gotaways they don't even talk about. The volume of drugs coming across our border now is the highest by far. Host: Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, your response? Biden: Fentanyl and its byproducts did see a decline for a while, but we need to use advanced machinery to detect it. We put together a bipartisan deal for more fentanyl detection machines, more agents, and more resources at the border. This deal was vital, but Trump opposed it for political reasons, not because it wasn't a good bill. We need those machines, and we need to crack down on the precursors for fentanyl coming from Asia. Mexico is working with us to ensure they don't have the technology to produce it. We need those machines and resources to effectively tackle this issue. Host: President Trump, the question is about what you will do to help Americans currently struggling with addiction. Trump: This is relevant to the issue. Biden ended the Remain in Mexico policy and catch and release. I made it catch and release in Mexico, not here. We had hard negotiations with Mexico, and we had a lot of successes. It's like dealing with a hostage situation. Biden's administration pays billions every time. For example, we have a Wall Street Journal reporter held by Putin, who is laughing at Biden. I would secure his release quickly, even before taking office. Host: Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, any final thoughts? Biden: The middle class has been devastated by Trump's policies. He now wants a $5 trillion tax cut over the next 10 years, which will bankrupt the country. He had the largest deficit of any president in American history and hasn't made any progress with China. We need to focus on real solutions and support Americans struggling with addiction through comprehensive and effective policies. Thank you. Host: Thank you to both candidates for your insights and participation in this important debate. This concludes our discussion. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Good night. Let's turn to concerns that voters have about each of you. President Biden, you would be 86 at the end of your second term. How do you address concerns about your capability to handle the toughest job in the world well into your 80s? Biden: First of all, I spent half my career being criticized for being the youngest person in politics. Now, I'm the oldest. This guy is 3 years younger and a lot less competent. Just look at the record: 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, and billions of dollars in private investment. We brought back the computer chip industry to the US after losing it because he sent jobs overseas. I convinced Samsung to invest billions in the US, creating high-paying jobs. Host: President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything? Biden: Yes, the idea that we are a failing country is absurd. We are the envy of the world. Name one major country that wouldn't trade places with the United States. We are the most progressive and strongest country in the world. We keep our word, and our allies trust us. Those who Trump cuddles up to, like Kim Jong-un and Putin, don't want to mess with us. Host: Former President Trump, you would be 82 at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve? Trump: I took 2 cognitive tests and aced them. He took none. I took physical exams every year, and I'm in very good health. I won 2 club championships. To do that, you have to be smart and hit the ball a long way. I feel as good as I did 25 to 30 years ago. I was willing to take a cognitive test, and I aced them. Host, President Biden, any response? Biden, well, you can see his numbers don't add up. I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap down to a 6 when I was vice president. But, by the way, I'm happy to play golf if he carries his own bag. Can he do it? Trump, that's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap. I was an 8 handicap. I've seen him swing. Host, let's move on to a specific concern that voters have about you, President Trump. Will you pledge tonight that once all legal challenges have been exhausted, you will accept the results of this election regardless of who wins? And will you say right now that political violence in any form is unacceptable? Trump, of course, political violence is totally unacceptable. If you look at my statements on Twitter at the time and my other public statements, you will see that I have always condemned it. If you look at my statements on Twitter at the time and the speech I made in the Rose Garden, you would see one of the strongest statements ever. Nobody talks about that, they focus on a small number of people who went to the Capitol, many of whom were ushered in by the police. Nancy Pelosi said it was her responsibility, not mine. But the answer is, if the election is fair and free, I will accept it. I wish he were a great president because then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be under indictment because I wouldn't have been his political opponent. He's so bad as a president that I am going to make America great again. We're a failing nation because of his policies. His military policies are insane, and he's driving us towards World War III. Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi Jinping don't respect or fear him. Biden, there's Article 5 in NATO, which states that an attack on one is an attack on all. I can't think of a single major leader in the world who wouldn't trade places with the United States. We are powerful and have wonderful people. Right now, we are needed to protect the world because our safety is at stake. If Putin takes Kyiv and moves into Poland or Hungary, we will have a war. Host, President Trump, the question was, will you accept the results of this election regardless of who wins? Trump, Russia took a lot of land from Bush and Obama. Biden. They took nothing from Trump because they knew not to play games with me. Now, they are going to take the whole thing from Biden. Ukraine is not winning the war, they're running out of people and have lost many cities. Russia would have never attacked if I were president. To answer your question, if it's a fair and legal election, absolutely. I wasn't going to run again until I saw the horrible job Biden did. He's destroying our country. Biden, when you lost the first time, you continued to appeal in courts across the country, and not one single court said any of your claims had any merit. Yet, you continue to provoke this lie about misrepresentation and stealing. There is no evidence of that at all, and I doubt you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea that if you lose again, you'll accept it, you accepted nothing. You can't stand losing. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time. Host, we'll be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Commercial break. Host, it is now time for the candidates to deliver their closing statements. As predetermined by a coin toss, we will begin with you, President Biden. You have 2 minutes. Biden, we've made significant progress from the debacle left by President Trump in his last term. We must ensure a fair tax system. Ask anyone out there, do you think the tax system is fair? Nobody making under $400,000 has had a single penny increase in their taxes and will not if I'm re-elected. Trump increased your taxes because of the deficit and inflation due to his handling of the pandemic. He now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the US. For example, he wants to eliminate Medicare's ability to negotiate drug prices with Big Pharma. We got insulin down to $35 instead of $400, and no senior pays more than $2,000 for prescriptions. That reduced the federal debt by $160 billion over 10 years because the government doesn't have to pay exorbitant prices. I'm going to extend that to all Americans. We're going to ensure affordable childcare and address health problems caused by lead pipes. We will continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break. Biden, thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement. Trump, like so many politicians, this man is just a complainer. He says we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax or that tax, but he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions of people to pour in. Our military doesn't respect him. We looked like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel, and it was such a horrible thing that would have never happened if I were in charge. Iran was broke. Anyone that did business with Iran, including China, couldn't do business with the United States. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah. Ukraine should have never happened. He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it for 3.5 years. We're living in hell. We have riots everywhere. You talk about Charlottesville, this is 100 times worse. The whole country is exploding because of him. People don't respect him, and they have to respect their president. They don't respect him throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military, got the largest tax cut in history, and the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut regulations that created jobs, but he's putting a lot of those regulations back on. We did things no one has ever seen, even from a medical standpoint, with right to try, allowing terminally ill patients to try experimental treatments. We implemented choice for our soldiers, so instead of waiting months to see a doctor, they can get treated immediately. That's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. We're in a failing nation, but it's not going to fail anymore. We're going to make it great again. Host, thank you, former President Trump. President Biden, any final remarks? Biden, yes, our country has faced significant challenges, but we have made substantial progress. We must continue to build on this progress to ensure a better future for all Americans. Thank you. Host, thank you to both candidates for a robust debate. This concludes the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Good night.